The cold rain fell in relentless sheets, drenching the bustling city streets. Pedestrians rushed under umbrellas, dodging puddles as they hurried past Jake. A homeless man crouched beneath the awning of a high-end restaurant. His tattered coat and mismatched shoes were soaked through, doing little to shield him from the bitter chill. A small, crumpled cardboard sign sat beside him. The words "hungry" and "homeless. Any help is a blessing" scrawled in faded marker. Jake wiped the rain from his face, his fingers trembling from the cold. The smell of seared steaks and truffle oil wafted through the air. Mocking his empty stomach, he stared at the parade of luxury cars pulling up to the restaurant's valet, their sleek designs reflecting the golden glow of the streetlights. "All I need is $1, he muttered bitterly to himself. "One damn dollar for a sandwich. But who in there would even notice me, let alone care?" Jake's life had not always been like this. Once, he had been the proud founder of a promising tech startup, driven by ambition and boundless optimism. But when his company faltered and debts piled up, the cracks in his personal life deepened. His wife, unable to weather the storms of financial ruin and his growing depression, left him. Bankruptcy soon followed, and with it, the loss of his home. One misstep led to another, until Jake found himself on the streets, invisible to the world he once believed he could conquer. As Jake watched the restaurant's revolving door spin open to reveal polished heels and tailored suits, a pang of bitterness surged through him. He clenched his fists, his voice barely a whisper. "Do any of you even know what it feels like to be hungry? To lose everything?" The thought lingered, heavy and suffocating. Jake lowered his gaze to the rain-soaked sidewalk, trying to ignore the cruel contrast between the opulence before him and his empty stomach. But something made him look up again. The unmistakable figure of Elon Musk emerged from the restaurant, flanked by a small entourage and security detail. Jake froze, his heart hammering. The billionaire's face was as familiar as his story was extraordinary, a tale of bold risks and improbable triumphs. Musk's achievements had been a source of inspiration for Jake during his entrepreneurial days, though they now served as a painful reminder of his own failures. The billionaire paused under the awning, scanning the street as if searching for something. Jake swallowed hard. His fingers gripped the edge of his damp cardboard sign. "Do I dare?" he murmured. For a fleeting moment, Jake imagined Musk walking away, oblivious to the man huddled in the shadows. But then the billionaire's gaze swept toward him, and their eyes met. Jake's breath caught in his throat. This was it, his chance. A single dollar could change everything. Jake scrambled to his feet, clutching his sign like a lifeline, rain streaming down his face as he took a shaky step forward. Jake's legs felt like lead as he approached Elon Musk, his heart pounding against his ribs. The billionaire's entourage tensed, his security detail already stepping forward to intercept the bedraggled man. But before they could act, Musk raised a hand, halting them. Jake's voice cracked as he forced the words out. "Sir, can you spare $1?" The world seemed to stop. The rain, the hum of engines, the distant chatter of passers-by, all of it faded into silence. Musk tilted his head, his piercing gaze fixed on Jake. For a moment, Jake thought he might be dismissed like countless times before. Instead, Musk stepped closer. The faint scent of cologne and cigar smoke clung to him, a stark contrast to Jake's damp, worn-out presence. "What if I gave you more than $1?" Musk asked, his tone calm but loaded with curiosity. Jake blinked, unsure if he had heard correctly. The words felt surreal, as if they belonged in a dream. Around them, the murmurs of onlookers rose. Someone pulled out a phone, the glow of the camera unmistakable. Anything would help, Jake stammered. "But why?" Musk's lips curled into a faint, enigmatic smile. Why not? He replied. Sometimes the simplest acts lead to the most unexpected outcomes. Jake's throat tightened. He searched Musk's face for a hint of mockery or pity, but found none. There was only a measured seriousness that unnerved him more than kindness would have. The billionaire's gaze shifted briefly to his security team, and with a slight nod, he signaled them to step back. "Follow me," Musk said, turning toward a nearby black Tesla. Jake hesitated, his feet rooted in place. "Follow you?" he echoed, glancing at the car, then back at Musk. "Yes, unless, of course, you'd rather stay here," Musk replied, arching a brow. Jake hesitated for a beat, the gravity of the moment pressing down on him. He could hear the whispers of the crowd, feel their eyes on him, but none of it mattered. This was more than a chance. It was an invitation to something unknown, something terrifying yet impossible to ignore. With a deep breath, Jake nodded. "Okay." Musk gestured for him to climb into the sleek vehicle. Jake caught his reflection in the tinted windows, a gaunt, disheveled man with hollow eyes and a threadbare coat. He felt out of place, like an intruder in a world he didn't belong to. As the doors closed and the car glided away, Jake finally broke the silence. "You don't know me. Why would you care?" Musk's expression remained inscrutable. "I have a theory," he said, "and I'm curious to see if I'm right." Before Jake could press further, the car turned corner and came to a smooth stop outside a sleek, minimalist cafe. The glass facade glowed warmly in the rain, a stark contrast to the chill Jake carried in his bones. Musk stepped out first, holding the door open for him. Jake hesitated on the threshold, unsure what awaited him inside. But as he stepped into the cafe, he couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just veered onto a path he never could have anticipated. Musk ordered 2 coffees, gesturing for Jake to join him at a quiet table in the corner. The air was thick with the scent of espresso and polished wood. Jake sat, his hands trembling as he wrapped them around the warmth of the coffee cup. Musk leaned back in his chair, studying Jake like a puzzle waiting to be solved. "Tell me," he said, "what would you do if you had a second chance?" Jake swallowed hard, unsure how to answer. "I don't know," he admitted. "I don't even know where to begin." Musk's smile returned, faint but purposeful. "Good. Let's start there." The cafe's low hum of conversation and the rhythmic hiss of the espresso machine seemed miles away to Jake, who sat frozen across from one of the most powerful men in the world. The warmth of the coffee cup seeped into his hands, grounding him momentarily in the surreal reality unfolding before him. Elon Musk leaned forward, his gaze steady. "Here's the deal," he began, his voice low but commanding. "I'll give you $10. 000. No strings attached." Jake's breath hitched. He sat straighter, his mind spinning. "What? $10,000? He shook his head as if the words were foreign. "Why would you?" Musk raised a hand, cutting him off. "I'm not finished. There is a catch." Jake's stomach sank. Of course, there was a catch. Nothing in life came without one. "What's the catch?" he asked warily. "You must invest it in something meaningful," Musk said, his tone deliberate. "Something you believe in. It can't be for survival, it has to be for growth, for purpose." Jake's mouth opened, then closed. He looked down at the cup in his hands, the steam curling upward like fleeting dreams. "Why me?" he finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "You don't know my story. I'm just nobody." Musk's eyes flickered with something unspoken, a depth that made Jake shift in his seat. "I see a spark in you," he said simply. "Call it intuition. You were meant for more than this. And I'm giving you the chance to prove it." Jake's heart pounded. He wanted to laugh, to cry, to yell that Musk was wrong, that his spark had burned out long ago. But the billionaire's conviction held him captive. For the first time in years, Jake felt the faint stirrings of something he thought he'd lost: hope. "And if I fail?" Jake asked, his voice tinged with both fear and defiance. "Then you fail," Musk replied without hesitation. "But you'll know you tried. And so will I." He leaned back, folding his arms. "The question is, are you willing to take that risk?" Jake sat in silence, the weight of the offer pressing down on him. The thought of holding $10,000 felt as foreign as stepping onto Mars. Yet, the fear of failure loomed larger, a shadow of every mistake and misstep that had brought him here. Jake hesitated, his throat dry. "I don't know if I can do it." Musk's expression softened, though his resolve remained unshaken. "You can," he said simply. "The only thing stopping you is the story you keep telling yourself. Change the story." Jake's mind raced with possibilities and doubts. He thought of the countless nights he'd spent on cold concrete, the bitter taste of shame when people turned away from him as if he didn't exist. He thought of the life he once had, the dreams he'd buried. Maybe, just maybe, he could unearth them again. With a deep, unsteady breath, Jake nodded. "All right, I'll do it." Musk extended his hand across the table. "Good, then we're in agreement." Jake hesitated, then clasped the billionaire's hand. It was warm, firm, and somehow reassuring. As they shook, Jake felt a spark of determination ignite within him. Small but undeniable, Musk leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "I'll have the funds transferred to you within the hour. What happens next is entirely up to you." Jake opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. Fear gnawed at the edges of his resolve, but so did a flicker of excitement. He was stepping into the unknown, a place he hadn't dared to tread in years. Musk stood, signaling the end of their conversation. "One last thing," he said, pausing. "If you succeed, it won't be because of the money. It'll be because of you. Don't forget that." Jake watched him leave, his heart pounding as he tried to process what had just happened. $10,000, a chance to rebuild, a challenge from one of the most brilliant minds alive. As Jake stepped back into the rain, he knew one thing for certain: his life would never be the same again. Jake stood in the doorway of his new apartment, a modest one-bedroom unit nestled in a rundown but quiet part of town. The smell of fresh paint and cheap carpeting greeted him as he stepped inside, his footsteps echoing in the empty space. For the first time in years, he closed the door behind him and felt a sense of safety, a sanctuary from the harsh streets. He set the duffel bag of secondhand clothes and essentials on the floor. The $10,000 from Musk had done more than buy him a roof. It had sparked a fire inside him. Musk's words echoed in his mind. "What happens next is entirely up to you." Jake spent the next few days meticulously planning his next move. He knew he couldn't squander this chance. His thoughts kept circling back to the passion that had once defined him: cooking. Before his startup, before the chaos of failure, Jake had dreamed of owning a restaurant. He had spent years honing his recipes, his favorite being hearty, simple dishes that could feed a family on a budget. But opening a restaurant was far out of reach. Instead, Jake focused on something more achievable: a food truck. It would be mobile, low cost, and most importantly, a direct way to reconnect with people through food. Jake spent a portion of the money on a beat-up food truck, its exterior faded and its engine temperamental. He spent days scrubbing it clean, patching up the paint, and installing a second-hand stove and refrigerator. A small hand-painted sign now adorned the side of the truck: Jake's Comfort Kitchen. On a chilly morning, Jake opened for business, parking near a busy downtown office hub. The menu was simple: hearty soups, freshly baked bread, and filling sandwiches all priced affordably. His first day was slow, with just a handful of customers. Some were kind, offering compliments on the food, while others barely glanced at him as they handed over crumpled bills. By the end of the week, word began to spread. A few regulars returned, smiling as they ordered their favorites. "You make the best grilled cheese in the city," said one young woman, her office badge dangling from her neck. Jake grinned, the praise warming him more than he expected. "Thanks. That's my mom's recipe. Simple but classic." But the path wasn't without hurdles. One day, a group of teenagers mocked the truck's worn-out appearance, laughing as they snapped selfies in front of it. Jake gritted his teeth, refusing to let their jeers sink too deep. Another time, a competitor in a sleek, fully equipped food truck parked a block away. Siphoning off his lunch rush, Jake had to get creative, offering free samples to passers-by to drum up interest. And then there were the quiet battles, self-doubt creeping in late at night as he counted his meager earnings, wondering if Musk had made a mistake in choosing him. But every morning, Jake pressed on. The truck became more than a business. It became his mission. With each bowl of soup or sandwich handed out, he felt a piece of himself returning, a version of Jake that he thought had been lost forever. Months passed, and Jake's story began to gain traction. One afternoon, a local journalist stopped by, intrigued by the lines forming at Jake's truck. After tasting the tomato bisque, she leaned across the counter with a notepad in hand. "This is incredible," she said, scribbling furiously. "Mind if I ask, how did you get started?" Jake hesitated, glancing at the growing line behind her. "It's a long story," he said, "but let's just say someone gave me a chance, and I'm trying to pay it forward." The article went viral, painting Jake as a symbol of resilience and second chances. Business boomed overnight. People flocked to Jake's comfort kitchen, not just for the food, but for the story behind it. Touched by the outpouring of support, Jake began using some of his profits to give back. He started offering free meals to the homeless, setting up a small table near the truck with a sign, "If you're hungry, eat for free." The sight of people like himself, weathered by the streets, but smiling as they enjoyed a warm meal, brought Jake more fulfillment than he ever thought possible. One evening, as Jake cleaned the truck after a long day, a homeless man approached timidly. "Are you Jake?" the man asked, clutching his hat nervously. "That's me," Jake replied, turning to face him. I heard about what you're doing." The man said, "Thank you. For people like me, this means a lot." Jake felt his throat tighten. "You're welcome. Just paying back the kindness I was given." As the man walked away, Jake stood in the dimming twilight, gazing at the truck that had become the cornerstone of his new life. The struggles weren't over, far from it. But for the first time in years, Jake felt like he was building something meaningful. The thought of Musk's challenge lingered in his mind. Was he proving Musk right? Or was this just the beginning of something even greater? Whatever the answer, Jake knew he wasn't done yet. Jake adjusted the collar of his newly purchased suit, the fabric unfamiliar against his skin. The invitation had come out of nowhere, a sleek envelope embossed with gold lettering, inviting him to a private event hosted by Elon Musk. Jake wasn't sure what to expect, but he knew one thing: he had to be there. The venue was a sprawling event space overlooking the city skyline, filled with the hum of conversation and clinking glasses. Jake hesitated at the entrance, watching guests in designer gowns and tailored tuxedos glide past him. His palms were damp, his confidence faltering. "You made it," a voice called out. Jake turned to see Musk approaching, his signature casual demeanor cutting through the opulence of the room. Musk extended a hand, a faint smile playing on his lips. Jake shook it, his grip firm despite his nerves. I didn't think I'd ever get a chance to thank you in person, Jake said, his voice thick with emotion. Musk gestured toward a quieter corner of the room. Come, let's talk. They settled into a pair of leather chairs overlooking the glittering cityscape. Musk leaned back, studying Jake with the same penetrating gaze from months earlier. You've come a long way, Musk said simply. Jake nodded, unsure where to begin. I didn't think I could do it. Some days. I still don't. But the truck, the food, the people I've met, it's changed everything. Musk's smile widened, his expression one of quiet satisfaction. That's what I wanted to see. Not just what you'd build, but who you'd become in the process. Jake frowned, leaning forward. I have to ask, why me? Out of all the people you could have helped, why pick some washed-up guy on the street? Musk paused, his gaze drifting to the city lights. Because I've been where you were, he said finally. Not homeless, but close enough. Years ago, when I was starting out, someone believed in me when no one else did. They gave me a chance, and it made all the difference. I wanted to see if that same spark existed in someone else. Jake stared at him, the weight of Musk's words sinking in. I don't know what to say, he murmured. Say you'll keep going, Musk replied, his tone firm. This isn't just about you anymore. You've inspired people who see your story and realize they can rise from nothing too. You've built more than a business. You've built hope. Jake felt his throat tighten, his thoughts racing. He thought of the homeless man who had thanked him, the regulars who came not just for his food, but for the sense of community his truck offered. Musk stood, his presence commanding as ever. I have another proposition for you, he said, pulling Jake from his thoughts. Jake rose to his feet, his heart pounding. Another proposition? Musk nodded. I want to help you expand, turn your food truck into a chain, not just for profit, but for purpose. Imagine a network of trucks providing affordable meals and jobs for people in need. I'll invest, but I want you to lead it. This is your vision, Jake. The room seemed to tilt beneath Jake's feet. He gripped the back of the chair for support, his mind struggling to process the offer. You want me to partner with you? Musk's grin returned. That's the idea. Jake felt a swell of emotion rise in his chest, tears threatening to spill. He extended a trembling hand, meeting Musk's firm grasp. I won't let you down, he said, his voice thick with determination. I know you won't, Musk replied, releasing his hand. As the night went on, Jake mingled with other guests, sharing his story and absorbing the moment. For the first time in years, he felt like he belonged not just in the room, but in the life he was building. By the time he left the event, the city seemed brighter, the air clearer. Jake clutched the invitation in his pocket, a reminder of how far he'd come and how much further he could go. Driving home, he glanced at the lights of his food truck parked in the distance, its small glow a beacon in the night. Jake smiled, the words Musk had spoken echoing in his mind. This isn't just about you anymore. Jake knew there were challenges ahead, but for the first time, he welcomed them. He wasn't just rebuilding his life. He was building a legacy. Jake's food truck empire was gaining momentum. What had started as a single, weathered vehicle was now a small fleet, each truck stationed in bustling neighborhoods across the city. More importantly, each truck employed individuals struggling to get back on their feet, recovering addicts, veterans, and the formerly homeless. Every meal sold felt like another step toward fulfilling the purpose Musk had envisioned. One crisp autumn afternoon, Jake stood outside one of the new trucks, watching as the lunch rush subsided. He felt a sense of pride as customers complimented the food and thanked the staff. This, he thought, was what rebuilding a life truly looked like. Then he saw him. A man in a tailored gray suit approached the truck, his confident stride stirring a flash of unease in Jake. The man's face was both familiar and unwelcome, a ghost from a life Jake had tried to leave behind. "Jake," the man said, stopping a few feet away. "Long time no see." Jake stiffened. "Thomas." The name left his mouth like a bad taste. Thomas Aldrich had been Jake's business partner during his ill-fated startup. The man who had embezzled funds, crippling their company and sending Jake's life into a downward spiral. "You've got some nerve showing up here," Jake said, his voice cold. Thomas raised his hands, a mock gesture of surrender. "Look, I'm not here to cause trouble. I just heard about what you're doing, and I wanted to see it for myself." Jake crossed his arms, his jaw tightening. "So, you're here to admire the wreckage you caused?" Thomas winced, but his polished demeanor quickly returned. "I know I made mistakes, Jake, big ones. But look at you now. You've rebuilt everything. Maybe even better than before." "Better?" Jake's voice rose, and a few heads turned. He lowered it again, but his words dripped with venom. "You ruined my life, Thomas. I lost everything, my company, my wife, my home, and now you just waltz in, acting like none of it matters." Thomas sighed, his shoulders sagging slightly. "I'm not proud of what I did. I was desperate, and I made bad choices, but I never thought it would go as far as it did." "That's your excuse?" Jake's voice trembled. "You destroyed everything I worked for." "I'm sorry," Thomas said, his voice soft but firm. "I mean that. I can't undo what happened. But I thought you should know. I've been following your story. You've done something incredible, Jake. Something even I couldn't ruin." Jake stared at him, torn between fury and a strange sense of vindication. "You think a sorry erases what you did?" he asked bitterly. "No," Thomas admitted. "But maybe it's a start." The words hung in the air, heavy and unresolved. Jake wanted to lash out, to vent the years of pain and resentment that had built up inside him. But he couldn't. Not here. Not now. Instead, he turned away. "If you're really sorry, then leave. I don't need your apology, and I sure as hell don't need you in my life." Thomas hesitated, then nodded. "All right, but for what it's worth, I'm glad you found your way back. Not everyone gets a second chance." Jake didn't respond. He waited until Thomas was gone, then leaned against the side of the truck, his hands trembling. The encounter had reopened wounds he thought had healed, dredging up memories he had buried beneath years of hard work and determination. As the afternoon wore on, Jake threw himself into the business of running the truck, greeting customers and helping his staff. But Thomas's words lingered in his mind, unwanted and unsettling. That night, as Jake sat in his apartment, staring at the glowing skyline, he replayed the conversation over and over. Thomas's visit had stirred something in him, not just anger, but a deeper question about how far he had come and how much of the past he was willing to carry forward. Jake realized he wasn't just rebuilding his life for himself. He was doing it for the people who believed in him, for the ones who needed his help, and for the person he had always wanted to become. But letting go of the past was easier said than done. The morning was busy at Jake's flagship food truck, parked outside a bustling community center. A line of customers stretched down the block, and the warm scent of grilled sandwiches and hearty soups filled the air. Jake worked alongside his staff, flipping sandwiches on the griddle and handing out meals with a smile. Then his phone buzzed in his pocket. He barely had time to glance at it, but the name on the screen stopped him cold. Amy Reynolds, a journalist whose article had been instrumental in turning Jake's story viral months ago. He wiped his hands on his apron and stepped away from the line to answer. "Amy?" He greeted her, his voice friendly but hurried. "What's up, Jake?" Amy said, her voice tinged with urgency. "I wanted to give you a heads up. I'm working on a story about Elon Musk's philanthropic efforts. And well, your name came up. Jake blinked, momentarily confused. My name? Why? What's this about? There are whispers that Musk's recent acts of generosity, including your story, might be part of a calculated PR strategy. Amy said, her tone careful, a way to silence critics who've accused him of being out of touch or too focused on his wealth. Some people think you're just a piece of that puzzle. Jake felt his stomach drop. You're saying this was all just for show? I don't know, Amy said quickly. I've been digging into it, and I wanted to hear your thoughts. Has Musk ever hinted at anything like that? Jake's mind raced. He thought back to their conversations. Musk's cryptic remarks. His deliberate choice to help Jake when thousands of others were struggling. Was it all part of some master plan? A stunt to polish Musk's public image? I need to think about this, Jake said, his voice strained. Of course, Amy replied. I'll hold off on running the story for now, but if there's anything you want to say, let me know. And Jake, don't jump to conclusions. Sometimes the truth is more complicated than it seems. The call ended, but Jake's unease lingered. He pocketed his phone and returned to the truck, but his mind wasn't on the work anymore. Each smiling customer, each dollar exchanged, felt different now, as if the foundation of everything he had built was suddenly in question. That evening, Jake sat in his apartment, staring at the city lights. Musk's words echoed in his mind. Prove me right or prove me wrong. The choice is yours. Was he just a pawn in a larger game? And if so, did it even matter? He had built something real, something meaningful. But the idea that it might have been born from someone else's ulterior motives gnawed at him, determined to uncover the truth. Jake began researching Musk's other acts of charity. He spent hours combing through articles, interviews, and social media posts, looking for patterns. What he found surprised him. Jake discovered other stories like his, people Musk had quietly helped, each given a chance to rebuild their lives in different ways. A struggling artist who was now running a gallery. A single mother who had launched a successful daycare business. None of these stories had made major headlines, and none of the recipients had been pushed into the spotlight. It didn't seem like the calculated PR campaign Amy's sources had suggested. If Musk was doing this for public attention, why were so many of his acts of generosity hidden from view? The next morning, Jake returned to the truck with a new sense of resolve. He wasn't going to let doubts derail him, even if Musk's motives weren't entirely selfless. Jake's journey and the lives he was touching were real. Later that week, as Jake served meals during a free food event for the homeless, his doubts were put to the ultimate test. A sleek black car pulled up near the truck, drawing curious glances from the crowd. Musk stepped out, his presence as commanding as ever. He approached Jake, ignoring the murmurs around him. I hear you've been asking questions, Musk said, his tone even. Jake stiffened, unsure how to respond. I had to know, he admitted. Was this all of this just a publicity stunt? Musk's expression didn't waver. Does it matter? Jake opened his mouth to argue, but Musk continued. You've built something extraordinary, Jake. Something that's changing lives. Does it matter how it started? As long as it's real now. Jake's heart raced. It matters to me. I need to know if I was just a pawn in someone else's game. Musk's lips curved into a faint smile. I never do anything without a reason, but not every reason is as cynical as people assume. He paused, his gaze steady. You weren't a pawn, Jake. You were a bet, and you've proven me right in ways I never expected. With that, Musk turned and walked back to his car, leaving Jake standing in the glow of the truck's lights, his mind whirling. Was it the full truth? Jake didn't know, but one thing was certain. His journey wasn't over, yet the community event was in full swing. Jake's fleet of food trucks lined the park's edge, each surrounded by bustling lines of customers. The air was filled with the aroma of freshly grilled sandwiches and simmering soups. Mingling with the sounds of laughter and conversation, children ran through the grass, and a local band played upbeat tunes on a makeshift stage. Jake stood near the main truck, greeting customers and thanking volunteers who helped hand out free meals to the homeless. This event was his pride, a culmination of everything he had worked for. He felt a surge of gratitude as he looked around at the lives his business had touched. Then he saw him. Thomas Aldridge was weaving through the crowd, his tailored suit sharply out of place amid the casual, warm atmosphere. His presence alone was enough to make Jake's stomach churn. But it was the look of determination on Thomas's face that set alarm bells ringing. Thomas climbed onto the small stage at the center of the park. He grabbed the microphone, his voice cutting through the cheerful music as the band faltered to a stop. "Ladies and gentlemen," Thomas began, his tone commanding, "I think you should know the truth about your so-called hero, Jake Edwards." The crowd quieted, confusion rippling through the sea of faces. Jake froze, his heart pounding. He pushed through the gathering crowd, his mind racing. Years ago, Thomas continued, Jake wasn't some down-on-his-luck saint. He was a failed entrepreneur who drove his own company into the ground. He lost everything, and people like me got caught in the fallout. The words hit like a punch to the gut. Jake stepped forward, his voice steady but sharp. "That's enough, Thomas." Thomas smirked, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. "Oh, I'm just getting started. Did Jake tell you about his failures? About the investors he let down? About the people who lost their livelihoods because of his poor decisions?" The crowd murmured, their eyes darting between Thomas and Jake. Jake climbed onto the stage, taking the microphone from Thomas with a firm grip. "Yes," Jake said, his voice loud and clear. "I failed, and I'm not ashamed to admit it." The murmurs stopped, the crowd hanging on his every word. "I made mistakes," Jake continued, his voice steady despite the emotions threatening to overwhelm him. "I took risks that didn't pay off. I lost everything, my business, my home, my family. But I didn't give up. I clawed my way back. And with the help of someone who believed in me, I built something better, something real." He paused, scanning the faces in the crowd. "You want to know the truth? I'm not perfect. I've failed more times than I can count. But every time, I've gotten back up. And what I've built now isn't just for me. It's for every person who's ever been knocked down and needed a second chance." The crowd erupted into cheers, their applause drowning out Thomas's indignant protests. Jake turned to Thomas, his gaze unwavering. "What you took from me, I've rebuilt with my own hands. You can try to tear me down, but it won't work. Not this time." Thomas opened his mouth to respond, but the crowd support for Jake was undeniable. With a scowl, he turned and disappeared into the throng. After the event, Musk approached Jake, his expression unreadable. "You handled that well," he said. Jake shrugged, exhaustion etched into his features. "I'm used to facing my past. It doesn't scare me anymore." Musk smiled faintly. "Good, because it's not your past people care about. It's what you've done with it." Jake nodded, the weight of the moment settling over him. He realized then that his journey wasn't just about redemption. It was about showing others that failure didn't define a person. What mattered was how they rose from it. As the event wound down, Jake stood by his truck, watching as the last few customers trickled away. The words he had spoken to the crowd stayed with him, a reminder of how far he had come and how much further he had to go. Jake sat in his quiet apartment, staring at his laptop screen. The confrontation with Thomas lingered in his mind. But something else weighed even heavier. Musk's cryptic words after their last conversation. It's not your past people care about. It's what you've done with it. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Musk's interest in him than he'd been told. The articles he had read about Musk's acts of charity hinted at a pattern, but nothing definitive. Was Jake just another experiment to satisfy Musk's curiosity? Or was there something deeper at play? The faint ping of an email broke the silence. Jake clicked it open and froze. The message was from Musk himself. Subject: a story worth knowing. Jake, I believe it's time you understood the full story. Meet me tomorrow at the cafe where we first talked. Noon. Bring an open mind. Jake leaned back in his chair, his heart racing. He didn't sleep much that night, his thoughts consumed by what Musk might reveal. The next day, Jake arrived at the cafe early. The sleek, modern space looked exactly as he remembered. The faint hum of conversation and the aroma of fresh espresso filling the air. He chose a table in the corner, his foot tapping nervously beneath the table. Musk arrived precisely on time, his casual yet commanding presence turning heads as he approached. He slid into the seat across from Jake, offering a small nod of acknowledgement. "Thanks for coming," Musk said, signaling for 2 coffees without looking at the menu. "I didn't think I had a choice," Jake replied, his tone a mix of humor and tension. Musk chuckled lightly. Fair enough. For a moment, the two sat in silence, the noise of the cafe feeling distant. Finally, Musk leaned forward. "I've been keeping an eye on you for longer than you think," he began. Jake's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" Musk sipped his coffee, choosing his words carefully. "When your startup collapsed, it wasn't just another failure in the tech world. Your story caught my attention. The way you poured everything into that company, the risks you took, the way you fought until the end. That kind of determination is rare, even in Silicon Valley." Jake blinked, surprised. "You knew about me back then?" "I did," Musk admitted. "And when I heard what happened after, how you ended up on the streets, I couldn't get it out of my head. I've been there, Jake. I've been one wrong decision away from losing everything. The difference is, someone gave me a chance before it was too late." Jake sat back, trying to process Musk's words. "So, what? You decided to repay the favor by helping me?" "Not exactly," Musk said, shaking his head. "I didn't want to just hand you money and walk away. I wanted to see if the spark I saw in your past was still there. I wanted to know if someone could rise from the ashes of complete failure, not just for themselves, but for others." Jake was silent for a long moment. "So, this was all a test?" Musk tilted his head, his expression thoughtful. "A test? Maybe. An experiment? Definitely. But it wasn't about proving something to me. It was about proving something to yourself." Jake stared at the table, his mind racing. The pieces of the puzzle were finally clicking into place. Musk had known more about him than he had ever let on, but the billionaire had chosen to let Jake's journey unfold on its own terms. "Why now?" Jake asked quietly. "Why tell me all of this?" Musk smiled faintly. "Because you've earned it, and because I wanted you to know the truth before you go any further. What you've built, it's yours. I gave you a push, but every step after that was yours to take. Never forget that." Jake nodded slowly, the weight of Musk's words settling over him. For the first time, he felt a strange sense of closure, not just with Musk, but with the man he had been before his fall. As they finished their coffees, Musk leaned back in his chair, a satisfied look in his eyes. "You've done well, Jake, but I think this is just the beginning. What you do next, that's the real story." Jake left the cafe feeling lighter, yet more determined than ever. Musk's belief in him, though unexpected and complicated, had been real. Now, it was Jake's turn to carry that belief forward. Back at his apartment, Jake pulled out a notebook and began sketching plans for the next phase of his business. The past no longer felt like a weight. It felt like fuel, propelling him toward a future he could finally believe in. Months had passed, and Jake's dream had become a movement. His food truck chain, now called Second Chance's Kitchen, had expanded beyond the city. Each truck served as a beacon of hope, employing individuals who had faced hardship: the homeless, recovering addicts, single parents, and veterans. Jake's mission wasn't just about feeding people. It was about restoring dignity and offering opportunities to rebuild lives. Each truck bore the same tagline painted in bold letters on its side: a meal for the body, hope for the soul. Jake walked through the company's headquarters, a modest but bustling office space filled with energy and purpose. Staff members coordinated new truck deployments, social media campaigns, and partnerships with local shelters. Jake's assistant, Marla, approached with a tablet in hand. "You've got a call with the city council in 20 minutes, she said. "They want to discuss expanding into underserved neighborhoods." Jake nodded, his mind already racing with ideas. But before he could respond, Marla added, "Oh, and don't forget, the gala is tonight. Musk will be there." The gala. Jake had nearly forgotten. It was a high-profile event celebrating innovators who were making a difference in their communities. He had been invited as one of the keynote speakers, a role he never imagined for himself a year ago. That evening, Jake arrived at the gala in a tailored suit, his nerves a mix of excitement and disbelief. The grand ballroom shimmered with crystal chandeliers and the low hum of conversation. Innovators, philanthropists, and business leaders mingled, their achievements celebrated in glowing displays around the room. As Jake stepped onto the stage for his speech, the room fell silent. He adjusted the microphone, his heart pounding. But as he scanned the crowd, he saw familiar faces: his staff, friends, and even a few of the people he had hired from the streets. "I want to tell you a story," Jake began, his voice steady. "It's not about success, it's about failure. About how I lost everything and found myself at rock bottom, begging strangers for help. One of those strangers believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. And because of that, I'm standing here today." The crowd listened intently as Jake shared his journey, the rise and fall of his startup, the despair of homelessness, and the incredible chance Elon Musk had given him. He spoke about the people he had met along the way, the lives his trucks had touched, and the unwavering belief that everyone deserved a second chance. "When you give someone a chance," Jake concluded, his voice thick with emotion, "you're not just helping them, you're creating a ripple that can transform communities. I stand here because of a ripple that started with a single act of kindness. And now, it's my turn to keep it going." The room erupted into applause, a standing ovation that left Jake overwhelmed. He stepped off the stage to find Musk waiting for him, a rare look of pride on his face. "You've built something remarkable," Musk said, shaking Jake's hand. "And you've done it your way." Jake smiled. "I couldn't have done it without you. But now, it's about what we can do for others." Musk nodded, his expression thoughtful. "That's the right answer." The night ended with more conversations, partnerships, and opportunities. But for Jake, the most meaningful moment came as he left the gala. Outside, he saw a young man sitting on the curb, his clothes tattered, his eyes filled with the kind of despair Jake knew all too well. Jake approached him, crouching down to meet his gaze. "Hey, you hungry?" The man looked up, startled, but nodded. Jake smiled, pulling a business card from his pocket and handing it over. "Come by one of our trucks tomorrow. We'll get you something to eat and maybe, if you're ready, a job too." The man's eyes widened in disbelief. "Are you serious?" Jake's smile grew. What you do with this chance is up to you. As he walked away, Jake felt a profound sense of purpose. His journey, his struggles, and his triumphs had all led to this, a life dedicated to lifting others, one chance at a time. In that moment, Jake realized his legacy wasn't in the trucks or the accolades. It was in the lives he touched and the ripples he created. And it all started with a single, bold question: can you spare $1? Jake stood in the bustling headquarters of Second Chance's kitchen, watching the hum of activity around him. The business was thriving, but it was the lives being transformed that filled him with pride. Every truck represented a second chance for someone who had been overlooked, just as he once had been. Marlowe approached him near the entrance. "Jake, there's someone here to see you." Jake turned to see a young man standing hesitantly at the door, his clothes worn and his expression guarded. Jake recognized him immediately, the man he had met on the curb outside the gala. "You came," Jake said, smiling warmly. I don't know if I'm cut out for this," the young man said, his voice trembling. "My life's a mess." Jake placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "So was mine," he said softly. "But someone believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. Now it's my turn to believe in you." The young man's eyes widened, a spark of hope flickering behind them. Jake led him inside, explaining how the program worked. He could see the fear in the man's face, but also the courage it had taken to show up. Jake knew that courage was enough to start. Later that night, as Jake locked up for the day, he stood for a moment under the stars. His thoughts drifted back to the first time he had approached Musk. "All I need is $1." Back then, Jake thought survival was all he could hope for. Now, he realized that what he truly needed, and what Musk had given him, was a chance. As he turned to leave, he saw the young man still cleaning up, focused and determined. Jake smiled and called out to him. "What you do with this chance is up to you," he said, the words carrying the weight of his own journey. As Jake walked into the night, he felt the profound peace of a life transformed, not just his own, but countless others. He knew now that success wasn't measured by wealth or accolades, but by the legacy of hope you leave behind.